Welcome to another edition of the Advisor's Guide to Estate Planning, where we're continuing our series and interviewing advisors that have successfully implemented estate planning services for their clients. And we facilitate them sharing with you, the listener, how they are having success stepping into this estate planning gap. Today, we are going to Corning, New York. I think that's upstate New York, to speak with Amy Irvine, owner of Rooted Financial Planning. Amy holds a master's degree in financial planning. She's a certified financial planner, an enrolled agent, certified college financial consultant, master planner, advanced studies, certified divorce financial analyst, and a certified financial therapist. And so you've got all the designations. Welcome, Amy, to another edition of the Advisor's Guide to Estate Planning podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. And yes, Corning is upstate Western New York. So
Okay.
it's from the Western New York side of New York. It's actually downstate Western New York, I should say. So but very far west. So to the New York City people, we are upstate.
That's my, see that the center of the universe, that's where my guess was. They probably still considered you up, even though
Oh yeah.
you're
Yeah.
left. That was like, okay, I don't know exactly. Good to know. So, in your future, is there, with all the really cool designations you have, a CEP? Are you familiar with the CEP?
Yeah, it's probably not something I would say no to.
Hmm.
It's not something that's in the forefront. I think I would
Hmm.
probably do something that is more transition or behavioral
Hmm.
finance oriented
Yep.
before I sought that out because I'm really a big believer. I've always been a big believer of education, which is why you see a lot of the designations that you
Hmm.
see. But I've been in the financial planning realm or the financial finance world, I should say, since 1994. I joined a small trust company in a little town called Hornell, New York, and that was where I got my feet wet, my toes wet, and I started cutting my teeth in this particular profession that I just love. And back then we didn't have formal financial planning programs. I came from an accounting degree background. That's how I got that job, just in general. But I feel very fortunate to have landed and working in a trust company, as you know, Matt. The
Hmm.
core of one of the trust companies is, especially back in 1994, was estate planning. I mean,
Sure.
that's where a lot of the trust departments focused on was tax and and estate planning, and some of it certainly was the tax side of things too. But those two components were the primary components, and so that is where I cut my teeth all those years ago, and it has followed me. And I feel really fortunate because I think a lot of other financial planners, when they first come out of college now, or even historically, they started more in that investment
Yep.
based world, that
Yep.
core investment based world, where my world started in a completely different arena. And so I, in some ways, feel like I had a leg up
Yeah.
than how other financial planners that are my same age-ish, and
Hmm.
experience have in the profession. So as I've grown in the field by taking various courses and working on various designations, I really have gotten to the point where I think that so much of what we do, and I've learned in working with clients over the years, that we all have our own trauma that we bring to our
Mm.
world of finance in some way, shape, or form. And estate planning is one of those areas where everybody has an experience, whether it's a parent, whether it's an aunt or an uncle, whether it's a brother or sister. Everybody has some sort of family, could be a grandparent, some sort of a family experience around estate planning. It's a very emotional topic to talk about, and those of us that talk about it all the time become somewhat disengaged with the
Mm.
emotion that it can bring up with
Mm.
people. And so I think for me, you asked about, pursuing another designation, and I would say, probably if I'm going to pursue one, it's somewhere around the realms of more transition, experience or behavioral finance or both in some way, shape, or form. So, long-winded way of answering your question that no, I
No.
haven't, that's not out of my radar, but it's not one that's on the top of my list yet.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, the CEP is the certified estate planner. And but I found this fascinating too in your experience and background. And so you shared some of this that I was going to ask about because the fact that you grew up and you have in your bio that how much you loved math as a kid, you obviously came up through an
Mhm.
accounting and got early what today is becoming comprehensive financial planning experience. But you also, so you have that numbers brain, but then you've also pursued the certified financial therapist. And so this would be fascinating because you said it first as trauma and the are you that type of person that is unique in that you understand the therapist side of coaching and advising and you have the numbers because those are a rare mix of
Well,
people, but pretty cool.
I don't, I think it's work for me. I
Mm,
think because I am very much an analytic, most things to me on the analytical side, the logic side become very easy. I remember taking a class in college that was a statistics class. And when we were working around all the probabilities, I'd be like in and out when it would be time to take exams. And one of my college professors told me at that point in time, like, you should pursue collegiate level knowledge of statistics. I'm like, that it seems so easy. Like, why would, why? It didn't seem like was not hard for me. So my brain is just very geared, math of finance, statistics, calculus. Those were all classes that I could never understand why somebody struggled with it, although I do
mm,
realize that that's not how everybody's built. So for me, I think it was the people that I got the chance to work with throughout the course of my career that really helped me or coached me on making sure that I understood that this is much more about the emotional side than it is the analytical
mm,
side, and gave me guidance and really taught me with a nice little safety net to make sure that I was not judgmental in nature. That everybody makes decisions for different reasons. Sometimes they don't really know the reason why they're making the decision. Was it something that happened to them when they were a kid? Was it something that happened to them when they were an adult? And, one of the designations you mentioned was a certified divorce
mhm,
financial analyst. And when you're working with people that are going through that kind of trauma in their life, you really need to put your compassionate hat on. So I think that's one of the reasons why I pursued several of those designations was because although the analytical side comes to me very easy, it it takes me I have to pursue the education and the training, the therapy side, and the coaching side to be reminded like these are the things that you need to ask. These are the things that you need to be aware of. You need to you need to put that other side of your brain to work just a little bit more. So I wouldn't say that it came natural, but I would say that it's been an acquired skill.
mm. But one you had to prioritize, which is cool that you understood that
Absolutely.
because I don't see a CFA in
Mhm.
there in that list. And that was
No, I don't have
probably the
that.
natural track you were on your brain, but to go, I need to be more rounded on this side. And so two things there
Yeah.
that I think are interesting about you, especially in your firm. Number one is you've built an all female practice, which
Mhm.
is really cool. And there's not enough of. And so share with that, and then maybe in context, maybe this answers the question too of a name like Rooted, because I've seen a
Mhm.
lot. There's no shortage of lighthouses and beacons, financial plannings. I've never seen anything related to Rooted, and there must be a good story there.
Oh, there is a good story. So, the reason that the firm, so we have five financial planners. Three of them are more predominantly client facing, and the other two are um, more, they work with clients, but more support roles in general. they do co-meetings with us, and one of them is our chief investment officer. But one of the reasons that I started my firm was I got to a point, I was in my mid 40s, and I got to a point where I found that I was doing a lot of pro bono work for my girlfriends that were in my same age group, right?
Mm.
So ex-gen women, professional ex-gen women that were busy, 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 crazy. They had the financial resources to pay for a financial planner, but they couldn't find somebody that would do financial planning because a lot of their assets were tied up in their retirement accounts. And so you can't, as a financial, most traditional firms at that point in time weren't charging, couldn't charge or didn't charge based on the assets under a retirement plan. So they thought they were doing the right things and their careers were advancing, but they were starting to have some pretty significant complexities in their lives around career changes, or maybe getting RSUs or stock options. They were starting to think about, oh my gosh, my kids are going to be going to college, retirement's, 10, 15 years away. Parents need some help at this stage of the game. So their lives were getting considerably complex around their finances. And so I was working, and they wanted to pay me, but the firm that I was working with didn't have that kind of planning engagement, long-term planning engagement. So I decided to create a space where that could happen. And at first it was just me. And I did have the firm did have men as financial planners at one point in time. But what I found was that I work, I wanted to build a practice where it was women helping women. So after a few, I would say, false starts around this kind of concept, we found the right mix, and we've continued to find the right mix of women. And I'm so lucky. I work with the most amazing group of planners and support staff. I get up every morning. I'm always excited to work with them, and they're an amazing team. And the age gap is from me, the oldest of 52, down to late 20s. And so we've got every
Right.
generation right now built in our firm. So 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and different family dynamics. So when we're talking to these women that I wanted to help, that was, the X gen, now we're able to actually take it down into the millennial generation, Gen Z, and help them, because although I might not know what they're going through, Becky, Kate, Liz, or Carrie might know exactly what they're going through. And they don't just sympathize with them, they empathize with them.
Hmm.
So we made the decision several years ago to continue that pattern moving forward. Since our focus is working with busy professional women and their families, we wanted it to be busy professional women and their families that were actually running the firm.
Great.
And the name Rooted Planning Group actually came from when I originally started the firm. It was called Irvine Wealth Planning Strategies, and that's still the parent LLC,
Okay.
like that's the name of it. But as we started to grow, I thought, who's this Irvine person, right? I mean, it's me,
Yeah.
but eventually I'm going to retire at some point in time, and there's going to be this other group of women that are going to take the firm forward. Maybe we need to think about rebranding the firm to be more holistic in nature. And as we sat down to brainstorm about coming up with the new DBA, we kept coming back to this idea that if your roots are strong, then your branches can be strong.
Mm.
And since we work with busy financial women and their families, it's all about those branches. When the storms
Mm.
come, because they come,
Mm.
when the storms come, can the tree bend with the storms? Can the branches bend with the storms? Are the roots solid
Mm.
in nature? And so, and it was really important to us that people understood that we're a financial planning firm that offers all the components of financial planning, which is cash flow and investment management and risk management and tax planning and tax, like we have all of these. We are not just a tax firm or just an
Hmm.
investment firm or just an insurance firm. We are a financial planning firm that offers all of these services. So rooted and then planning and then group is how the name actually came to be.
That's great. I love that. I love the analogy you've put together there as well, and kind of that it makes perfect sense. And but it's unique, very
Yeah.
unique in that approach. And quite
Yeah.
honestly, you're a
Thank
unique
you.
firm and in what you've built there. So you hinted at it, and maybe we'll talk about this because I think this does apply, and eventually we'll talk about estate planning, but this other stuff's super interesting to me.
Yeah.
The pricing model, the your
Hmm.
primary clients didn't fit into the traditional models. And so share with me more there, how you guys do your pricing, because that's also a unique approach that serves for your ideal
Yeah.
client profile. And then maybe we'll talk about that in context of estate planning because it probably plays into that.
It does. Yeah. So we are a flat fee firm. So although we offer, the whole planning model, all of the services that we offer fall under that flat fee. So people will often ask, so do you do investment management? And we'll say, yes, we do investment management, but it falls under this flat fee. So the way that we come up with the fee that we charge a client is based on the complexities. Do you have 10 accounts located with 10 different locations? Well, that increases the complexity. Do you have a family that has a blended family, which definitely plays into the estate planning piece,
There you
right?
go.
Then,
Sure.
that adds to the complexity. Do you have stock options or equity compensation? That plays into complexity. Do you have an S corp? There's another complexity. So we look at it from a standpoint of what is the service or the amount of service and time that we are going to be spending with the client, and then we price that out based on all of those complexities instead of based on, well, what's your assets under management. We've built our model based on, what amount of time are you actually going to require, what amount of brain space, I call them brain calories.
There
What
you
amount
go.
of brain calories are you actually going to utilize? How many branches are we
There you
actually
go. Yeah, makes sense.
spinning off, right? So what needs to be, I always talk in terms of how much nutrients do I need to actually put in the ground to make those roots strong so that you
Yeah,
have all these branches that we can actually provide guidance on. Because although the branches might go in every which direction, they come down to that one trunk, right? That one
yep.
family that we're trying to support, that one, type of general idea of your plan, but your plan has all of these different branches. And if you actually look at the branches, they have micro branches that have, the actual leaves that go along with it. So I decided really right from the get-go that I was going to be a flat fee firm that incorporates all of these aspects of the client's lives, including a big component is, I would say the big key components. Yes, we talk about cash flow, which is always where a plan starts, but the more complex side is usually the tax preparation and planning side. Certainly, there's a piece of it that's investment management protection, but estate planning is a very big piece of what we get into with many of our clients. How do we make sure that, we always check annually, we always check their beneficiaries just to make sure that the beneficiaries are right on every single account the way they want it to be. But how do we plan beyond that to make sure if there's an incapacitation issue, do they have their powers of attorney in place? Do they have their healthcare proxy, HIPAA documents in place? And are there opportunities to either have a trust or a will? And, based on every client, it's different, but how do we make sure that that folds into the plan strongly? And one of the components that we found over the years, it's not that they're not willing to talk about it. It's that the time sometimes that goes into, okay, I got to meet with an estate planning attorney. All right, now I got to get the documents signed. We're talking about a lot of this, and let's just be clear, like we're not estate planning attorneys. We don't
Yep.
give legal advice, right?
Yep.
But we do collect a lot of the information, and certainly from a tax planning perspective, we're talking to them about some of that that goes along with it. If somebody's estate plan is really complex, I'm going to encourage them to talk to an estate planning attorney.
Yep.
They need attorneys. We want them to work with attorneys, and a lot of the attorneys that we work with want the more complex
Yep.
cases.
Yep.
They want to spend the time focusing on that. But even beyond that, like even working with like their kids, having their powers of attorney and
Yep.
healthcare proxies in a basic role when they get to that magic age of 18,
Yep.
which, we laugh about like thinking that they're adults and making those kinds of decisions, but those are things that need to be done. And so for
Hmm.
our clients, it's looking at what level of complexity do you have in your life and making sure that the right, at least something is in place with regards to some of those
Yeah.
things. And if it's more complex, like getting them into the right care of the right attorney. And because we work with clients all over the country,
Okay.
we have some really good local attorneys in Florida, some really good local attorneys in New York, and some really good local attorneys in California. But because we work, I say all over the world, really all over the United States, it's really hard for us to have all of those proper contacts.
Yep.
So if a client's case is estate planning is, I would say falls within the right realm of
Yep.
making sure that, we can collect that information and they know what they need and want, then we feel like, having them have those documents is so important to making sure that they're we're taking care of that piece as well. We're helping them with that
Yeah.
piece as well.
Yeah, how has that looked for you? Because I think we met you about a year ago, and so when
Mhm.
you learned about Encore and launched, and
Yeah.
so how has that looked for you maybe before you had Encore, for those straightforward clients that just need those documents in place versus
Yeah.
after beginning to work with Encore and what you guys have been able to do in the last year or so?
Yeah. Great question. So before it was a struggle. Like we would tell them to do it, it would stay on the to-do list. We'd coach them to do it, it would stay on the to-do list. It was for them, it was a barrier of getting something that they knew they needed to get done. And it was just because it was one more thing that they needed to do. And it was one more appointment that they needed. Again, we're working with busy women,
Hmm.
you know, and their jobs are pulling them, their kids are pulling them, we're pulling them, their community is pulling them. And then they've got one more thing that they've got to do. And one of the reasons that they often work with us is because we sort of were that one-stop shop location. We did their
Yep.
taxes, we would work on their investments, like, so this was that outlayer. We're like, hey, we have this solution, are you willing to do this? They're like, yes.
Mm.
They'll sit with us for a meeting, they whip out we just walk them through all the Q&A, all the systems. They generally know the answers to the questions, and it's just a matter of filling in the blanks. And then we get the documents. There's a notary either in our office, if they're in the Corning office, or Becky and our team, if they're in New York State, she's gotten appointed as a remote notary, so we've got that solution. And then if they're not, then what's really handy now is you have that built-in
Yeah.
notary function, which
Yeah.
is fabulous, great
Great.
for clients that aren't in New York. Um, but that was the barrier often that stood in the way. So that barrier has been removed, and we've been able to move our clients through that process. And the feedback that we've gotten has been, this is great. This is great to know that this is done. This is such a relief. And for us, it's a relief too, because we know it's done and
Yeah.
their loved ones aren't left with questions,
Yeah.
right? That's the most important thing. And we've not had to, thankfully, we've not had to implement or use any of the documents at this point in
Hmm.
time, but just knowing, we've had some clients that were traveling, they were going to be traveling
Okay.
internationally. And so we wanted to make sure that their healthcare proxies, their power of attorneys were updated so that if anything was needed, we put it in our vault. And if it's needed, then they're able to access any of that information. Their loved ones we're able to get them that information. So it's been fabulous. And the point that I guess I want to make is that it's getting done.
Hmm.
And previously, it gets done sometimes, but it's one of those things that just keeps being pushed down the road, pushed down the road, pushed down the road. And now we're able to actually get it completed, which is just a real, gives clients a real peace of mind.
Yeah, that was the effect of that is them knowing they need to do it, and for you to be able to finally deliver, okay, we've got those things taken care of. And great prompt. And if other advisors didn't catch this, it's always those life events that are great prompts to say, let's get this thing done for
Mhm.
those that
Mhm.
tend to otherwise procrastinate, whether it be for whatever reason it is. But going on vacation out of the country, what a great prompt to say, let's get this
Yeah,
thing
it
done
is.
before you do that. Oh, great. We now have a deadline. We all need deadlines.
Yes.
And usually estate planning, we do have a deadline. We just don't know when it is. Yeah. But let's make a vacation
But
the
better you
deadline.
make the choice. Yeah, right. Like let's you make the choice instead of, having to follow the intestate rules that exist
Yes.
within each state, right? So,
Yes. Yeah.
and we do have a ton of clients. We tend to use the trust-based planning for a lot of our clients because we have quite a few clients that have multiple properties, so instead of having to probate in different states, they'll
Oh,
have
yeah.
the
There you go.
trust with the property and in the trust instead of having, like I said, multiple states where they have to probate. So, and with many of our clients, their kids are not in the same state where they are. So again, that just adds some layer of complexities to it. So if they put the real estate in the trust or even the brokerage accounts in the trust, then at least when it comes down to it,
Yeah.
it makes it a lot easier on the family.
Yeah.
That's the successor trustee.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's super helpful. I'd love to get your take on this is, and generally I have a sense that women tend to understand the need for estate planning more than us guys often. And so maybe because you're an all-female firm, you work with female clients, can you speak to that from your perspective, on in a way that I don't understand fully, but maybe I think that you would be able to have a unique perspective that I'd just like to get your take on thinking of the women versus men when it comes to estate planning dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. I think for a lot of women, a lot of the women that we work with, we're kind of a get stuff done gang, right? I mean, that's the sort of mindset that we have. And it is about making sure our families are taken care of. Not to say that men don't think the same way about making sure their family's taken care of, but they tend to think in terms of life insurance, disability insurance, that sort of thing,
Mm.
in my experience. And and I think we do think a little bit more about our mortality. Like that's a fear that we think a little bit more about. We joke at the firm a little bit because this is something that we've heard more than once when we talk to men about long-term care planning. They're like, no, I'm just going to die. I'm not going to have a long-term care event. I'm
Hmm.
just going to die. I'm like, well, I think we all want that. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
I mean, we don't want to die young, right?
Yeah.
And we all want to go, like when it's our time, we'd much rather go quickly than have a lingering illness. However, statistically,
Hmm.
that's
There you
not
go.
always the case. And so, I talking about stuff like this is having to face that we are not going to live forever. And that does bring up some emotions that I think women are really more willing to face and men just don't want to.
Yep.
It's not a fun, glamorous topic. But I think that's where, as financial planners, we need to listen to why they're resistant, feel out. You can joke with it a little bit, like, hey, come on, we really need to make sure this is taken care of because the last thing you want to do is leave your family members, like, give them this gift of this plan so that they know exactly what needs to be done but listen to what they're going through. And, again, we're genderizing a little bit, but a lot of
Hmm.
men don't like to
Sure.
talk about feelings.
Hmm.
Women are willing to talk about feelings, men not so
Hmm.
much, right? It's a vulnerability that unfortunately our society has placed on men. Like, you can't be
Yep.
vulnerable, right?
Yep.
You're not allowed. You're a man.
Yeah. Yep.
And as a financial planner, we need to bring that out a little bit and say it's okay to be
Hmm.
vulnerable.
Yep.
This stuff is not easy. It's not a easy topic to talk about. It does bring up some emotion to people. We've got to be able to hear what where those barriers are, and be willing to take the time to talk through where there's fear. And it might not be in the way that, like, why are you afraid of this?
Sure.
It's more really trying to understand where things are, why things can't move forward, asking the questions of, so for example, it's probably easy for me to explain it this way, Matt. Let's say that you and I are having a conversation and you're married, right? Your wife is
Hmm.
ready to go. She's ready to get this stuff done, but you're like, we got to talk about this over here, right? And having me bring it back to center to say, well, I, I'm sorry, what's your wife's name again, if you don't mind
Heather.
sharing? Heather.
Heather.
Okay. So Heather, I hear, this is something that's really important to you. Matt, can we agree that, this is something that is keeping Heather up at night just a little bit, and we really need to get this done. I know it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but the two most, unfun things to talk about is
Sure.
death and taxes.
You got them both covered.
But
You're
but right, but can we maybe map out what that would look like so that
hmm
if something happens to you and Heather is your survivor, we make sure that it's really clear that Heather has a plan in place, because her brain isn't going to operate the same. And this is true. Like, this is
Yeah.
your brain goes into a completely different mode when
Mm.
you're grieving and you lose somebody that you love deeply and has been your partner for a long period of time. And sort of bringing that back to center. It's not about you anymore, Matt. Now it's about Heather,
Yeah. Love it.
right? So it's working with a couple in a way that takes the pressure and the vision off from you and puts it on the person that you love and care for the most, which is Heather and your
Mm.
family. And that's
Mm.
where we need to really refocus things often. And that's where, sometimes the financial therapy side will come into
Yeah.
play, and learning
Yeah.
those skills and sort of utilizing the knowledge that's been gained and furthering my education about topics like this, because it's not fun to talk about dying.
Yeah.
It's not fun to talk about becoming disabled. It's not fun to talk about being incapacitated and, possibly never waking up. These are really stressful things to bring up to clients. And
Yeah.
I think as financial planners, we need to acknowledge that this is tough stuff.
Yeah, and love that, and it's so funny that you still grew up in an accounting numbers, and just how good you are at seeing that. These are great examples. This is gold for how to manage these difficult conversations, and so helpful. And so yeah, that's I can keep talking about this because it's really in those places that the greatest value that great planners provide is in that place. And have you seen that to be true? That when you get
Mhm.
somebody through this process that has been, I know I need to get these documents for the last 8 years, and I've been thinking about it, it's
Mhm.
there. I finally got it done. What's the reward, or what's been
Mhm.
the impact on that peace of mind you talked about? That
Yeah, well, we do actually say to somebody, you just worked through a very challenging, part of your financial health. What would you like to do to reward yourself? Maybe it's going out to dinner, and maybe it's having a glass of wine, maybe it's going for a hike. Maybe this is stuff that we need to acknowledge that was hard to do. If you think about training for any kind of physical event, like if you're a runner or a biker or anything, hiker, whatever, when you achieve a particular goal or next realm of advancement in your training, you do take time to reward yourself, right? Well, in financial planning, we often don't pause
Mm.
and say, that was hard. Let's acknowledge it was hard and let's be thankful that we got through it. Now we can have the sense of relief that it's done. And what do we want to do? What it can be a small reward if you don't want to spend the money, but like I said, maybe it could be crack a bottle of wine and say, we achieved this really challenging thing. we celebrate things like retirement. That's a big
Yeah,
deal. Uh,
sure.
in our firm, we celebrate April 16th like no tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go.
You
Exactly.
know, we
We're done.
celebrate we celebrate when our kids graduate from high school,
Hmm.
graduate from college. We celebrate when we get a new job. There's all these other things in our financial lives that we celebrate, but we often never think to stop and pause and celebrate that we did something that's going to be very meaningful to our family when we're no longer in their lives physically, right? When we're just emotionally and mentally in their lives in the future. We just did something that will give them guidance during this very big stressful time in their life. So I think taking the moment to stop, celebrate that you've achieved this, that you've done this
Mm,
is a very big part of accomplishing and getting this done. Because if we reframe, something like this, like estate planning in that way, like if I can get this done,
mm,
then I'm going to have, this that I'm actually going to do. Then people take the fear, a little bit of the fear out of it, and put the reward end on it. And if you've ever read the book, um, Switch, that it's a book about change, right? If you've ever read that book, then one of the things it talks about a lot is that it talks a lot about reframing things. So
mm,
when we think about death, like it's death,
mm-hmm.
how do you reframe it? But when you think about the estate planning that goes around that, and reframing that it's a positive thing that you're doing and planning, and it's going to be celebrated that you've completed this
Mm,
particular big piece of your financial plan. And it is a big piece. So when you've accomplished that, then what is the how is that going to make you feel, and how do you celebrate that success, just like you celebrate planning for years and years and years
mm-hmm.
of getting to retirement? What do you do when you get to retirement? You celebrate by maybe having a party, maybe taking a trip, maybe sleeping in. Your world changes when you achieve that particular part of your retirement or your financial plan.
Yeah.
We need to look at all of the aspects of our financial plan that same way, and celebrate when we achieve big milestones.
Love that. This is so good. And we're over time, but this is such good stuff that we're into. I want to keep
Well,
going,
thank you.
but we can't go forever because I want to. Oh, but there's more within this realm that is so valuable, especially in that reframing piece, is
Mhm.
the that it also is, and we see more and more advisors leading with estate planning conversations because it is a little
Yeah.
bit of that. You can reframe it into that begin with the end in mind, kind of Stephen Covey
Yeah.
approach to that. What are your
Yeah.
values? What matters most at the end of
Yep.
the day? And let's have a
Yeah.
conversation around that. And we could probably knock out your estate plan too while we're there
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
reframing it into a what matters most to you in life and legacy. And that's all an estate plan process is, not a let's focus on your demise.
Yeah. Or your disability or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It is about, and I do think it's really important that when we're working with our process, we have adopted I think I mentioned to you in one of our conversations, we use the money quotient
Yeah.
tools. And one of the reasons why we adopted the money quotient tools was because it starts with the value. It doesn't actually start
Yes.
with the financials. So we get to know our phrase is we want to get to know you before we know your digits.
Mm,
So when we're doing a discovery call with a client, we don't even ask about that stuff. We get into the questions around who they are as people, what's most important to them, so that we know what we're supposed to be planning for. And then when they hire us, then we get into the, like on our onboarding call, then we start to get into the actual, well, you told me this was important and this is something that supports that, right? Now we start to bring in your digits to the picture, but we always keep those values front and center. Like everything that you tell us, how does that connect to this value? How does it? And often what people will say to us is, there's no connection. We don't know why we're doing it. And it's easy to
mhm,
eliminate something when you
there you
have
go.
no actual connection, but you've made it a habit. It was just a habit. It's like procedures and processes sometimes in a company. A new person will come in and say, "Why are you doing it that way?" And you're like, I don't know. Because we've always done it that way. It's a
Mhm.
great way to like stop, think, and say, well, yes, we probably had a reason for that at one point in time, but that reason actually no longer exists.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's change that. And, some of those changes that you can make sometimes are en enormous in your overall financial plan, but it's just been a habit. It's just been habitual.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. Thank you for sharing your insights and your wisdom on your approach. And so I'm really grateful for you coming on our podcast to talk through this. And I know it's going to be incredibly helpful to other advisors that on how they think about incorporating these estate planning conversations that are so important. So we'll close it out here. Thank you for tuning in to the Advisor's Guide to Estate Planning. Appreciate your support. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, or share with colleagues and friends. For questions or feedback, email us at info@encoreestateplans.com. We can't wait to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks again, Amy.